The Unasked was not supposed to be a rescue vessel. I want to be clear about that from the start, because when Sector Administrator Vorreth Vehn filed his incident report 3 days later, he listed my arrival under the category of armed military intervention, which was technically accurate in the same way that calling a hammer a percussive surgical instrument is technically accurate. The Unasked had 16 forward gun emplacements, a hull rated for direct kinetic strikes, and a targeting array so aggressive it would ping your back molars if you stood too close to the sensor cluster. What it did not have was a medical bay, a relief manifest, or any official authorization to be in the Sorrel system at all. What it had was me. My name is Kalamasi, Specialist First Grade, Earth Reclamation and Transit Authority. On the day in question, I was 41 hours into a solo ferry run, moving the Unasked from the decommissioning yard at Hellas Station to the impound bay at Kepler Transit Hub, where she was scheduled to spend the next months being argued over by 17 different treaty lawyers, while 4 separate governments decided who owned her. The Unasked had been a Vorreth war machine, frontline attack class, before a joint interdiction team had boarded her, neutralized her crew, and towed her back to Hellas with a prize flag on her nose. Now she was my problem. And the problem was that she was 12 days of transit, alone through a region of space that had recently hosted a war. I had a bunk, a crate of protein bars, a toolkit, and a dog-eared copy of the Vehn Compact sector transit regulations. I was reading for professional reasons, and not because I had nothing else to do. I want to be honest about that. First sign of trouble was the comm array. The Unasked had 2 comm systems. One was the sanitized Earth Standard Relay I used to file transit logs and argue with Kepler Hub's scheduling office about my estimated arrival. The other was the Vorreth military array, which was supposed to have been decommissioned at Hellas before departure, but which, according to the handover manifest I had only read in full at hour 38, had been flagged for decommissioning pending final spectrum audit, which was bureaucratic language for we forgot. At 0341 ship time, the Vorreth array lit up. I was in the galley when it happened, and I heard it as a low, oscillating tone from the bridge, a frequency the Vorreth used for what their tactical doctrine called broadcast intercept mode, meaning the array had caught a signal on the general emergency band and was chewing on it. I put down my protein bar. I went to the bridge. I sat down in the command chair, which was built for a Vorreth pilot, and therefore approximately 3 sizes too large for me in every dimension, and I looked at what the array had caught. It was a distress beacon, Vehn Compact standard format, Class 2, station distress, not ship, which meant a fixed installation in trouble rather than a vessel adrift. The origin point was waystation Sorrel 7, Vehn Compact Transit and Resupply Station, located 2.3 light hours from my current heading in the outer belt of the Sorrel system. I knew Sorrel 7. I had refueled there twice in the last 4 years. It was a small station, maybe 80 personnel on a full rotation, docking arm for 6 mid-size vessels, a fuel depot, a communications relay, and a cafeteria that served a Vehn protein broth I had developed a genuine fondness for. The beacon had been transmitting for 6 hours and 14 minutes. I pulled up the routing data. A Class 2 Vehn distress beacon was supposed to automatically route to the nearest Conclave relief fleet, a Vehn Compact emergency dispatch coordinator, and 3 backup contacts in descending priority. I ran the checks on all of them. The nearest Conclave relief fleet, the Sorrel Sector Auxiliary Response Group, had been at waystation Sorrel 7 6 hours and 40 minutes ago. It had departed on emergency redeployment to the Mevar corridor, where something larger was happening. The fleet had been gone for 26 minutes when the distress beacon from Sorrel 7 first fired. Bad timing, in the way that a structural breach in a pressure hull is bad timing. The emergency dispatch coordinator for this sector had been dark for 11 days. I found the notice in the Vehn Compact sector bulletin, 3 pages in, under temporary service interruption, which was the Vehn Compact's diplomatic way of saying the coordinator's relay station had taken a debris strike, and nobody had come to fix it yet. The 3 backup contacts were a fleet tender, a patrol cutter, and a compact administrative vessels. All of them, per the routing logs, outside beacon range by a margin that made the numbers look like a clerical error. The distress beacon from Sorrel 7 had been transmitting for 6 hours and 20 minutes. It had reached nobody. Nobody except the decommissioned Vorreth military array on a ferry vessel, crewed by one man eating a protein bar. I sat in the oversized command chair and looked at the data for a while. Then I looked at my transit deviation request form, which lived on the terminal under a folder labeled Administrative. Rarely needed, and which I had never actually filled out before. Then I looked at the heading for Kepler Transit Hub, which was 22 hours away. Then I looked at the heading for Sorrel 7, was 2 hours and 11 minutes away at the unasked best emergency speed. I filed the transit deviation request, marked the reason as intercepted distress signal, proceeding to render aid and set the unasked on course for Sorrel 7. I want to be clear, was not the cavalry. I was one man in a captured enemy warship with a medkit, 14 protein bars, toolkit rated for Class 3 structural repairs, and approximately enough authority to file paperwork. What I was not was 2 hours and 11 minutes away from 80 people with a problem and nobody else coming. The unasked made good time. She was built for war, and war doesn't wait for fuel efficiency curves, so her engines were oversized for her mass, and she moved through the Sorrel system's outer belt, like she had somewhere to be, which for once she did. Spent the transit checking my toolkit against the most likely Class 2 failure modes for a Vehn Compact waystation. Pressure breach, reactor cooling fault, docking arm structural failure, comm relay collapse, and eating a second protein bar on the grounds that I might need the energy. At ZO 608 ship time, Sorrel 7 came onto visual. It was worse than I'd hoped and better than I'd feared. The station's outer ring had taken a debris strike, probably a fragment from whatever had been happening in the Mevar corridor, shaking loose rocks that had no business being in this shipping lane. And one of the 6 docking arm connectors had sheared clean. The arm itself was still attached, but it was venting atmosphere at a rate the station's patching systems couldn't keep ahead of, and the breach had propagated into the inner hub seal on that quadrant, which meant roughly 1/6 of Sorrel 7 was on emergency pressure lockdown, and the remaining personnel were crammed into the 5 good sections. None of that was what got my attention first. What got my attention first was the 4 Vehn Compact emergency fighters that scrambled the moment the unasked dropped out of transit speed. They were little things. Single-seat interceptors, atmospheric rated, absolutely not equipped to do anything meaningful against a Vorreth attack, class hull, but they came up hard and fast and put themselves between my ship and the station, and I could see from the trajectory data that whoever was flying them had made a decision that said, if this is what we think it is, we're going to make it cost something anyway. I opened a channel on the Vehn Compact standard emergency frequency, Waystation Sorrel 7. This is Specialist Kalamos, Earth Reclamation and Transit Authority, aboard the reclamation vessel unasked, formerly Vorreth attack class. I am responding to your Class 2 distress beacon. I am not a threat. I have a toolkit and medical supplies. Please advise your docking situation. There was a silence that lasted approximately 9 seconds. I have thought about those lessons many times since. Then a voice came back. Older male, controlled in the specific way that a person is controlled when they are working very hard at it. Specialist Os. This is Sector Administrator Vorreth Vehn. We are reading you as a Vorreth attack vessel. That's because she is one, sir. Claimed at Hellas. I'm ferrying her to impound. I intercepted your beacon on her old military array. The decommissioning was incomplete. I'm the only crew. Another silence, shorter this time. You are alone. Yes, sir. In a Vorreth warship. Yes, sir. And you diverted to answer our distress beacon. The signal wasn't reaching anyone else. May I dock? The fighters didn't stand down immediately. I didn't expect them to, and I would have thought less of whoever was commanding them if they had. But after 4 minutes and what I assume was a considerable internal discussion on the station, they moved to escort formation rather than intercept. And I brought the unasked in on the one functioning docking arm that could take a vessel of her size. She was too big for a waystation berth by a factor of about 2, but the arm held, and I cycled my airlock, and I stepped out into Waystation Sorrel 7, with my toolkit over one shoulder and my medkit in my right hand and a protein bar in my left, because I had been eating it when we docked, and I didn't have anywhere to put it. Vorreth Vehn was waiting in the docking corridor. He was a Vehn male of late middle age, which for his species meant his cranial ridges had fully developed, and his coloration had shifted, pale blue-gray of youth to a deeper slate. He was in a sector administrator's formal robe, told me he had put it on deliberately before coming to the docking arm. And it was torn at the left shoulder, told me he had been working on the pressure breach himself before I arrived. He had 7 station personnel with him, 2 of whom were armed, and all of whom were looking at me with expressions I could not immediately classify. He looked at me for a long moment. He looked at my medkit. He looked at the protein bar in my left hand. He looked back at me. "You are," he said carefully. The response: "Yes, sir. Can patch the arm breach. I'm rated for Class 3 structural repairs, and I have the materials. Your inner hub seal will need a shipyard, but I can stabilize it." "How many injured?" he told me. 11 personnel with pressure-related injuries from the initial breach, 3 of them serious. I went to work. The structural repair took 4 hours and 20 minutes. Vehn station engineers, very good ones as it turned out. They'd already contained the hub seal failure, better than I'd expected with station materials alone. Worked alongside me, and between us, we got the arm breach down to a seep rate the station's own systems could manage indefinitely, while the Conclave relief fleet was recalled from the Mevar corridor. The 3 serious injuries I couldn't do much about beyond stabilize. I had enough emergency med supplies in my kit to hold them until the relief fleet arrived, and I had been cross-trained on Vehn physiology as part of my sector transit certification. Turned out to be one of the more useful 3-credit courses I had ever taken. At 1714 ship time, filed my transit deviation closure report with Earth. It read in its entirety: distress signal intercepted via legacy Vorreth array, Sorrel 7, Vehn Compact. Structural and medical assistance rendered. Station stabilized, returning to route. ETA Kepler Transit Hub revised to plus 14 hours. Please advise treaty lawyers. The last sentence was not strictly necessary. I included it anyway. Vorreth Vehn met me at the docking arm when I left. He had changed out of the torn robe and into a fresh one, and he had brought 2 of his station engineers with him. And the 4 of us stood in the corridor for a moment while the unasked waited with the patience of a thing that did not know it had done something. "The Conclave fleet was our intended recipient," he said. "Beacon was calibrated for their frequency. I know. Their routing confirmation code was in the header. You were not supposed to receive it." "No, sir. The decommissioning was incomplete. Your signal reached the one system on my ship that wasn't turned off yet." He looked at me for a long time. His secondary cranial ridges had shifted slightly, the Vehn expression I associated with working something out in time. "What is the correct category?" he said finally. "For a distress signal that reaches the wrong vessel, crewed by a single man in a ship that was built to destroy stations like this one, comes anyway and patches the breach and stabilizes the wounded and returns to his route." I picked up my toolkit. "On our end, sir, call it a transit deviation. Standard form, box 4. Box 4, he repeated. "Routine on our end." He filed the report 3 days later, according to the copy that was eventually forwarded to Earth for treaty compliance review. Under category, he had written, Earth response, origin, reclamation transit, mechanism, signal intercept via legacy enemy array, crew 1. Under outcome, he had written, station stabilized, personnel preserved. No category in current compact administrative code is adequate. Recommend new category be created. Under notes, he had added one line: the vessel that answered was built to kill us. The man inside it was not. I didn't read that part until much later. By then I was already 3 days out from Kepler, arguing with the scheduling office about my revised arrival window, and the unasked was moving through clean space with her old enemy array still. Running because nobody had remembered to turn it off. I left it on.